Greetings, barbecue family. Welcome to another live episode of the Backyard SmokeMaster Barbecue Podcast. I'm your host, Kenyatta Robinson. I appreciate those of you who are tuning in live, but if you do need to catch us on the replay, you can get us at all the usual places, YouTube and your favorite podcast platform. So tonight we're going to get into how to fix the most common barbecue mistakes that you might be making. And I got this from an article that I saw on the Smoke Sheet. So it's an article that's written by Via, and let me share a picture of her. She's of the Smoke and Magic competition, Smoke and Magic competition screen. Oh my God. Okay. Smoke and Magic competition team. I was kind of glitching there because my share screen wasn't coming up. So the word screen was stuck in my head. All right. So get it together, Kenyatta. All right. There she is with her husband, Brad. So she penned an article that appears in the latest edition of the Smoke Sheet, which I believe I did link to the show notes for this particular episode if you want to check that out. But we're going to get into that in just a moment. But before we do, I always have to show my appreciation for the guys that are tuning in live, that are already in the comments. As always, I welcome your comments, your feedback, your questions, whether it's about the topic at hand or anything else barbecue related that might be on your mind. Don't be shy. Jump in the comments and let us know what you are thinking about. So hello to Correctional Officer for Lockdown. We got fellow Society Brother Mike Sue on, as well as Society Brother Montana Kev. They are already in the comments and they appear to be, digging the theme music. So I appreciate that. I'm happy to know that, the song is a good choice to get us going. Also, as we get into this, please take a moment, do all those usual things, hit that like button, subscribe if you haven't already subscribed, and then also take a moment, if you haven't already joined the Backyard SmokeMaster Society, take a moment to go ahead and do that. It's totally free, and it's a great way for us to keep the barbecue conversation going. All right, so let's get into this. We're going to get right into it. Bree described 10 big-time mistakes that you might be making. Some of these we've talked about before, but I think it's worth reiterating because really avoiding these types of mistakes can really make a big difference in your barbecue experience. So mistake number one, not preheating the grill. And basically, you're tossing your food onto a cold grill, and what that will do is lead to sticking, and it can also lead to an uneven sear. So that is something we absolutely want to avoid. Why it matters, you'll never, especially you guys I know you guys are all out there, you're not only barbecuing, but I know secretly you guys want to have some great pictures of your barbecue and stuff for the gram, right? Well, you'll never be able to get those picture perfect grill marks or that crusty bark if you start off with a grill that has not been heated appropriately. The fix is simple. Allow your grill to preheat for at least 10 to 15 minutes. Treat it like a warm-up stretch for your grill. Pro tip, on charcoal, wait until the coals are gray, wait until they've ashed over. And then on a pellet grill or a gas grill, make sure you close the lid, let those temperatures stabilize first, okay? Also, I should mention, these tips that we're gonna be talking about, these will work whether you're working with a charcoal, a charcoal-based grill like a kettle, a pellet grill, an offset smoker, a gas grill, whatever you've got. These issues, these mistakes that we're going to detail, they're pretty universal, and we're going to talk about how to make sure that we avoid them. All right, mistake number 2, cooking at the wrong temperature. Basically, the problem here is, and this is something that I was definitely guilty of when I first started to fancy myself a backyard pitmaster, going full blast for everything. Definitely not the way to go. All right, why it matters. What you'll end up with is your food will be burned on the outside, and we've talked about this. Once your meat is burned, there's really no going back. Nothing you can do to repair it, to fix it. Once it's burned. But yeah, your meat will be burned on the outside, and more likely than not, it will be undercooked on the inside. Here's the fix. We've talked about this a lot, and if you're not familiar with two-zone cooking, we definitely encourage you to learn about it and put it into practice. So when you have 2 zones, basically what we're talking about is having a direct side and an indirect side, or think of it as the cool side, that's the indirect side, and the hot side, that's direct. So in a 2-zone cooking setup, you're going to utilize the hot side for your direct cooking. And that's when you want to get like a nice sear, for example, on a steak. We're going to use the cool side or the indirect side for roasting. And a lot of times we'll use that for the finish. So really utilizing the 2-zone cooking method, that can really be your best friend when it comes to barbecue. And it's really one of the keys. If you haven't already mastered it, I think once you put it into practice and you kind of get accustomed to it and used to it, you will find that your barbecue outcomes will improve greatly. So definitely utilize the 2-zone cooking setup. A lot of grills, are really, I'd say are set up well to utilize them. Your Weber kettles are good for the 2-zone. Like a PK360 is good. The Summit Kamado. I mean, pretty much, it's really just a matter of setting up how you set up your fuel, right? So for instance, if you want to set up a 2-zone cooking setup, basically bank your coals off to one side of the grill, and then the other side have no coals. That's all there is to it. And once you put that into practice, you'll be well on your way. Here's a pro tip. Think of your grill like an oven with a broiler side. Okay, if you go out there with that type of a mindset, that will help you tremendously. Okay, let's get into the comments and see if you guys have any comments or questions. Let's see, the first one that came up, first question is from Lynn. Lynn says, can we get a technique for sweetbreads on a smoker grill, either Weber Summit Kamado or kettle? Oh, okay, that's a good question. Now, I personally have not done any sweetbreads or any, baking of things similar to that. But right off the top of my head, okay, my thought is really, again, your Summit Kamado, your kettle, or Weber Smoky Mountain. Maybe not so much the Smoky Mountain, but basically the point I want to make here is, for the most part, think of your grill. It's all of them, all outdoor cookers. They basically can perform the same functions as your oven can, with the added benefit that you're adding that smoke ingredient. Think of smoke as another ingredient, and that's something that you're able to incorporate into your food that you're not necessarily going to get, well, you won't get, inside your house with your oven. So basically, what it basically comes down to is fire management, which basically means learning how to control the temperature inside of your cooker. So depending on what you're cooking with, you want to be out there, you want to cook, you want to learn how to manage the temperatures, the adjustments that you need to make. Once you're able to nail down temperature control, and especially if you're able to maintain a steady temperature, you should really be able to cook anything that you want, including sweet bread. So that can definitely be accomplished. The only reason why I gave a little bit of a hesitation with regard to the Smoky Mountain, because it is expressly intended to be a smoker. Maybe depending on the size of your Smoky Mountain. I know I have one of the larger one. I have the 22-inch version. Get that comment back up. If I put enough fuel in it, I can keep it pretty hot. So my concern would be just with something that's like a dedicated smoker, whether or not it would be able to reach hot enough temperatures that you might need for baking. But it really just comes down to the recipe at hand. Lynn also asks, should we stop using wire cleaning brushes? Yes, absolutely. The reason being is that these wire brushes have been, they've got those sharp bristles, and if they break off and, they get left behind on your grill, it can end up in the food, and then that can create a dangerous situation for someone who's eating your food. If they accidentally, swallow or get one of those sharp wire bristles in their throat, or swallow it, that could definitely be bad news. So I would recommend, if it comes down to like a cleaning brush, go for something that's maybe made with nylon. You can also take a piece of aluminum foil, crumple it up, and you can use that on your grill to scrape off the hard to remove stuff from your last cooks. And then also another technique that I like, while your grill is still hot, take an onion, cut it in half, and run that onion across the grill grates. Not only will it help to clean the inside of your grill, your grates, it will also help keep those grates nice and seasoned. So those would be my recommendations. And yes, definitely I would say try to stay away from the wire bristled cleaning brushes. Correctional officer says, my wife is ear hustling as usual. Well, hello there. I'm glad you're listening in. And has stated that one mistake has been overloading the grill. And basically he's saying that that's a mistake that has been made at the correctional officer household. Also, she has stated that I have sprayed the meats too much too soon. You sprayed the meats too soon. Maybe too much, I could see, but I don't really have a problem with spraying the meats. Like I'm thinking what you mean is, for instance, spraying the meat maybe with a cooking spray, like a vegetable oil or a ham. I actually think that is a good thing, to spray, because that will help keep your meat from sticking to the grates. So I guess the question is, should you spray the meat or should you spray the grates? And I think that kind of comes down to personal preference, but I definitely I don't see an issue with spraying the meat. And I don't think there's an issue for spraying too soon. Now how much you're using, that might become an issue. Montana Kev says the slow and sear, yes, is a good example of two-zone cooking. Absolutely. Absolutely. I highly, if you do have like a Weber kettle, the Weber Summit Kamado, and that's really one of the main reasons why I love using my slow and sear. And I know a lot of people, they ask me, especially with the Summit Kamado, the Summit Kamado is already super versatile. It's large enough to easily set up two-zone cooking. And people ask when I made some videos where I was recommending the slow and sear, like why, or is it even really necessary? So my answer is no. It's not a must-have accessory, but it is a great to have accessory because the design of the slow and sear absolutely makes it super easy to have a two-zone cooking setup where basically you're putting your fuel, your coals into it, and then when you're ready to do like your direct cooking, you're able to put your meat directly over those coals. I love that it's got the little water reservoir right next to it to add a little humidity. And then obviously if you want to do indirect cooking, then you're moving your meat or positioning your meat from the opposite side of where the coals are inside of the slow and sear. And the slow and sear, it's designed kind of that oval shape, and it gives a nice way to contain. You always want to have a small contained fire, and the slow and sear will help make that even easier to accomplish. So I agree with Montana Kev that the slow and sear is a great example of a two-zone cooking tool. Lynn says, okay, now this is Lynn. This is not Kenyatta. This is Lynn. Lynn says, keep all women away from barbecue grills. Barbecue. Now I don't know, what is this? MGTOW. You have to break that down for me. I don't know what that acronym stands for. I'm thinking the M stands for men and the W is for women. I don't know what the GTO is. I'm almost afraid to ask, but go ahead, put that in the comments. And again, that is an endorsement from Lynn, not Kenyatta. Correctional officer says, my wife stated that it's been her fault for those two mistakes mentioned. Oh, now see, you shouldn't have put that in the comments. Now you were supposed to take that L, on behalf of your wife. But anyway, so she's saying that it's been her fault. She's been spritzing too soon. Spritzing too soon has affected the rubs on the meats cooked. I'm impressed. Okay, I follow. So, yeah, okay, I would say, again, I think it's okay to oil, apply like a cooking spray to your meat at the beginning of the cook. But then before you start spritzing during the cook, yeah, you do want to give your meat, the rubs, time and opportunity to begin to form that crust, the bark that you want. And sometimes you don't even have to spritz. Like you don't have to spritz just because you have the spritzing liquid next to you. That should really be a decision. A couple of hours maybe into the cook, depending on what you're cooking, eyeball the meat. If it's starting to look like it's drying out in certain spots, then I say go for it and spritz. But if the meat is still, you look at it visually and it's still, it looks pretty wet, it's quote unquote sweating, then you don't need to spritz and add more moisture. So that's really more of a kind of see as it goes type of a decision, and then decide whether or not spritzing is needed. And Montana Kev says the slow answer also has the slow and sear also has a compartment for water, which is a plus. Absolutely, completely agree with that. And then I saw that comment from KB Barbecue. All right, I'm not going to let you guys drag me down that rabbit hole and get me into trouble. So I'm going to let you all read that one for yourselves. I'm not going there. Okay, let's get back to the list, but you guys are funny. All right, mistake number 3, overcooking or undercooking the meat. And the problem here is essentially, trying to guess doneness by cutting the meat open. So that's something you absolutely want to avoid doing. All right. Let's see why it matters. Dry or unsafe food, that is obviously going to be a big problem if your food is too dry, and obviously if it's not cooked to the right temperatures, it can be unsafe. And either or, of those conditions basically results in what I would consider to be a wasted effort. And the fix, we talk about this all of the time. You're putting together your outdoor barbecue kit, and you're trying to think of, what accessories you absolutely need. This is one that I consider to be a must-have. You absolutely should have a meat thermometer, and I'm talking about, I know we all love the wireless ones, but I'm talking about make sure you have an instant read thermometer. You can get one for like $20, and then you can get the more fancy ones that cost more. But get yourself a meat thermometer that takes away all of the guessing and the mystery. You will know your temperatures right away, instantly. And this is so important. And we want to make sure we're cooking food to food safe temperatures. So for those of you who would like to get a quick handy guide, we've put something together. I don't know if you guys can read that, but let me just kind of give you some of the highlights. The importance of making sure that you're cooking food to food safe temperatures. So basically the bottom line is that you don't want to get anyone that's eating your barbecue, you don't want to get them sick. So when it comes to chicken, we're talking about 165 degrees Fahrenheit. Okay, and then basically you cook your chicken until it reaches about 160. You pull the chicken, let it rest. The carryover cooking will take it to 165. For ground beef, pork, lamb, veal, we're talking 160 degrees Fahrenheit. Your food must be fully cooked since bacteria can mix throughout. Your steaks, chops, roasts. I know we've got different, people have different preferences. Basically, for medium, we'll just use that as a baseline. For medium, you're going to pull your steak at 140 and let the carryover take it the rest of the way. Your fish and shellfish, you're cooking that to 145 degrees. Egg dishes, 160. And then if you're doing leftovers or casseroles, you want to reheat evenly and take that meat up to 160 degrees. And then we've also put together a little handy guide, some bonuses for target temperatures for common barbecue cuts that you might be doing outside, especially if you're doing low and slow. So for brisket, generally you want to take it to 195 to 203. Pulled pork in the 200 to 205 range. Your ribs are usually ready when they're between 195 and 203. Again, chicken, especially like your chicken thighs, you can take them further than the breast or the white meat, which again, we're going to take to 165. Your chicken thighs, we're going to take those to 175 to 185. Turkey breasts, 160 to 165. Okay. All right, let's see. So we're on mistake number 3. The pro tip here is, again, thermometers don't lie. Your gut does. So yeah, make sure you get that instant read thermometer and have that by your side. All right, let's move on. Mistake number 4. And I know a lot of you guys, especially with the whole smash burger craze, might be guilty of this one. Mistake number 4, pressing down on burgers. The problem is you're pushing the juices out with your spatula, and that's not a good thing. That sizzle that you hear when you're pressing down with your spatula, that is flavor leaving the building. The fix, hands off. Flip once, maybe twice. Let the burger do its thing. Okay, and I know some of you are ready to argue. Okay, if you gotta have your smash burger, that's fine, but wait until after the crust forms. You don't want to be pushing out all of that juice, all of that flavor prematurely. So let me know in the comments a few things. We've already talked about a few things, but let me know in the comments if you guys have thoughts, especially about pressing down on burgers. We also had the question about the Sweetwater bread that I tried to answer just based on my common knowledge, but I forgot to ask you guys if anyone has direct experience and any direct tips with regard to doing Sweetwater bread. So definitely jump in the comments and let us know. And then also, again, jump in here if you have other questions, that we may not, or other questions that come up on your mind here. Let's see, I see a pretty good comment. Let me get that up here from correctional officer who, and this made me think, you want to make sure when you've got that hot grill, make sure that you burp it open. Basically, you open it up a little bit and then a little bit more before you pull that lid all the way up, especially if it's a really hot grill. If you yank it open, you can lose that beard, lose those eyebrows. That's a good way to get an instant shave that maybe you weren't planning on. Okay, let's see. Looks like we've got some personal experiences with that. Correctional officer says, "Thanks for saving me for making the mistake to overcook a cut of meat I proudly purchased a few weeks ago. I made the mistake of thinking I obtained a brisket. Instead, it was a picanha." Yeah, no worries, no worries. Yeah, in the Backyard SmokeMaster Society, I think a correctional officer had shared some pictures of what he thought was a brisket, and he was really proud. But I don't know. I was looking at it and I was thinking, I don't know, I don't know, I don't know, I don't know. I don't know if that's a brisket. Um, and we discovered that it was a picanha. But no worries, because I think you've cooked several picanhas since then, and then hopefully that just gets you up and just about ready to tackle your first brisket. So I'm definitely looking forward to hearing about your experience with that. All right, mistake number 5, lifting the lid too often. And I know, we're excited, we're out there, you got that food on the grill, and you can't, you have a hard time resisting the urge to take a peek. So definitely don't want to do that. You don't want to be opening the lid every 30 seconds, quote unquote, just to check. Definitely don't want to do that. Why it matters. Basically, when you're opening the lid that often, you're dumping the heat, which ultimately stalls the cook. And sometimes the reverse happens. You're opening it very often, and then you're introducing a lot of oxygen into the firebox, which can then result in temperature spikes that you weren't planning on. So the idea here is, we want our cookers to stabilize, hit a nice stable temperature, and we want to keep that stability. And the best way to keep the stability going is to not be guilty of peeking inside too often. So the fix, instead of lifting the lid, set timers. We've all got cell phones, they all come with apps that, have a clock app on it, and they all have like a timer function. So you can use that to set a timer. Also, trust your thermometer that we talked about. Use it. And this is where maybe having a good leave-in thermometer will come in handy if you want to keep a constant, have constant insight into the temperature of your meat, or the ambient temperature inside of your cooker. This is where having a leave-in thermometer or a wireless thermometer can come in handy. But ultimately, we want to try and keep that lid closed, because you've heard it before. If you're looking, you ain't cooking. Okay. All right. Mistake number 6, not cleaning the grates. The problem is you're cooking over last week's crusty, dusty bits. You don't want to do that. You don't want to be introducing some foreign or unwanted flavors into your food. It can also cause sticking and off flavors, as well as flare-ups. If you've got a bunch of leftover grease going on inside, that can lead to some dangerous or unwanted flare-ups. And we talked about this. The fix: brush the grates while hot. And again, we're talking about using like maybe a nylon type of a brush, not the wired bristle type. Or ball up some aluminum foil, or like I said earlier, you can take an onion, cut it in half, and run it across the grates. That's a great way to keep your grates clean as well as seasoned, because the onions have natural juices and properties that get released when they come into contact with those hot grill grates. Pro tip from Bree, she says, oil your grates after cleaning, not before lighting. So that would be her tip on that. Mistake number 7, under seasoning the meat. The problem is forgetting to use salt or relying only on sauce. Ultimately, this is going to lead to bland meat, which is sad meat. Okay. So the fix: season generously before the grill, before you get your meat on the grill. So use rubs, use marinades, and finishing sauces. Okay, so we want to be properly, and if you're going to be taking the time, the effort to be out there with the cook, with the grill, the smoker, learning how to manage your temperatures depending on what you're cooking on, making those adjustments to keep the temperatures in the range that you want. If you're doing all of that effort, you don't want to put yourself behind the 8 ball before you even get out there by not seasoning your meat properly at the beginning. So the pro tip, salt early, sauce late. And, I'm one of those people that believes that, your barbecue should be able to stand up on its own, whether or not it has sauce or not. I think sauce should be purely optional. It should not be mandatory in order for your meat, your barbecue, to be considered good. So that's my personal take on that. Now here's a good one. Mistake number 8, and hopefully if you've been watching the podcast for a while now, you already know this one. But if you're new and you're just getting into barbecue, maybe you're ready to take it up for the first time, especially with Thanksgiving coming up and you're excited, you got a new grill and you're gonna try your hand at doing a turkey. Here's one: never, never, ever, ever use lighter fluid. The problem is that the fluid imparts its own kind of chemical taste to the food that you're cooking that's just not natural. It just ain't right. So you don't want to have that gasoline ribs vibe. The chemical flavor imparted from lighter fluid can ruin good meat. So instead of using lighter fluid, use a chimney starter. Chimney starter, it's cleaner, it's much faster, and it's safer. So basically, it's just like a little small chimney. Most of them are, or all of them that I've seen, they're always kind of like an oval shape. You put some unlit coals into the chimney starter, and then at the bottom, you can light like a wax cube or a piece of tumbleweed or even crumpled up newspaper. You light that and you set the chimney on top of that, and then the fire is contained and it will, light up and heat up your coals within the chimney. Usually for me, it usually takes about maybe 20 minutes for my coals to get nice and hot and ashed over. And it's at that point, I'll take those hot coals and pour them over unlit coals that are in my firebox. And if anyone is in the comments and doesn't know what a chimney starter looks like, let us know, and I'll be more than happy to pull one up on screen so you can see what it looks like. The pro tip from Bree is lump charcoal plus starter cubes equals the perfect light up. All right. Let me take a moment here to remind you, if you have not yet joined the Backyard SmokeMaster Society, that is my free barbecue community that we have, where great folks like we have here watching now, like Correctional Officer and KB Barbecue, Montana Kev, and Mike, folks like that are inside of the Backyard SmokeMaster Society, and we keep the conversation going all week long. So you don't have to, wait until podcast Wednesday to come with your questions. You can ask them whenever you want inside of the society. To join, it's absolutely free. It'll take you a minute tops. scan that QR code that's on the screen, and you can become part of the society. I hope and look forward to seeing you inside. Okay, let's get into mistake number 9, saucing too early. So the problem here is applying sauce at the very beginning of the cook. I think that kind of gets into, well, not necessarily. I think a correctional officer was talking about spraying too soon, but kind of similar in theory. Applying sauce at the start of the cook, or really, really well into the cook, but well before the meat, has come close to reaching its finishing temperature. So why it matters is sugar burns fast and it can impart a bitter glaze. And then also another side effect is that once that sugar burns, it can often, turn your meat darker and give it an appearance that you may not necessarily want for your food. So the fix is to apply sauce during the final 5 to 10 minutes if you're going to do sauce, because remember, my preference is this next part: let the guests sauce at the table. So to me, the sauce should be optional. But if you insist and you do want to, and you're really proud of your sauce recipe, and you want to apply the sauce and make make those ribs, give them that nice sticky feel, absolutely nothing wrong with that. Just make sure you wait until the final 5 to 10 minutes before you do, because you don't want those sugars to burn prematurely. Pro tip: for thicker ribs, if you're going to sauce, this is from Bree, sauce twice. Once at 10 minutes left, and then again right before pulling. Montana Keb says, if you happen to have a gas barbecue with a side burner, yes, you can actually set your charcoal lighter chimney on top of it and light it. Yeah, that's a great tip. Yeah, if you do have your gas grill with a side burner, and then a lot of these kind of these hybrid grills that I've seen, that I don't necessarily recommend, but if you do have a hybrid type of grill that cooks with multiple food sources, a lot of times they might have like a side burner, and yeah, that's a great use to get the fire started. You can put your coals into the chimney and then put the chimney on top of the side burner and heat it up that way. Lynn says, I need some new ideas for what to cook on a Weber Smoky Mountain. Squab, is that a typo? Squab, pigeon, pork shank, chuck roast, shark steak, smoke or no smoke. Squab. I'm kind of stuck on squab. I'm not familiar with squab. But anyway, again, basically, you can cook anything on an outdoor cooker. And the first thing I always think about when I say this is that you can even smoke ice cubes. You get your water, get a pot of water, put it over on the smoker, let it take in that smoke flavor, low and slow heat, and then take your smoked water and put it in one of those ice trays, put it in the freezer, let them turn into ice cubes, and then you've got smoked ice cubes. So I mean, you can do whatever you want, whatever. You're only limited by your imagination. If you can think of the recipe that you want, you can do it all on whatever outdoor cooker that you have. It's really No limitation other than maybe the size of the cooker. You know, because obviously, like I think of, like if you wanted to do like a whole hog, for instance, obviously you need the cooker needs to be large enough to accommodate it. But if you've got the size, you've got the imagination, you've got the idea, then yeah, absolutely, you can do smoked bourbon. And there are a lot of recipes out there. I haven't taken the time yet to really dive into it, although I really should. I have a friend that's like a cocktail making connoisseur, and I need to get him onto the podcast because I really do think we can marry cocktails, add that smoke flavor component, and totally be able to level up our drinks. Correctional officer says deer steaks will be nice for your Weber Smoky Mountain. That's a great suggestion. Okay, thank you guys for educating me. Squab is a small game bird. Okay, yeah, I'm city guy, so I wasn't familiar with that, but okay. And possum, absolutely, absolutely. Totally just limited only by, your imagination. If you can source it and it can fit on your cooker, you can you can smoke anything. And I do mean absolutely anything. All right, let's keep it going. I think next up is mistake number 10. So let me get that up here. So, mistake number 10, ignoring flare ups. Don't just stand there while flames are torching your food. Take action. Um, if you're, and I'll just say this, if your lid is open and you're getting, raging flames and you're not sure what to do, the answer is to close the lid. You should have a fire extinguisher nearby just in case. But the quickest solution is to cut off the oxygen that's getting into your cooker. So close the lid and then close the intakes as well if you can, if it's safe to do so. But also have a fire extinguisher nearby if things really, really get out of control. All right. Why it matters, again, if you've got that flame prematurely cooking your food, it's going to be, as we talked about earlier, it's going to be burnt on the outside and raw on the inside. Keep a spray bottle nearby or move food if you can to the cool zone. Never walk away mid-cook. So I know a lot of folks, we all hear stuff like set it and forget it. And then, we want to just be able to do a little bit of attending to the food just a little bit and then walking away for extended periods. And to some degree, depending on what you're cooking, especially if it's low and slow, sometimes you can get away with that. But you should definitely keep a mindset that you're going to stay nearby. You should always know what's happening with your grill. Okay. Pro tip: flare ups is just your grill's way of saying, hey, I need attention. So, again, don't panic, but just make sure that you take whatever the necessary steps are to control them. Let's see, getting back into the comments here, Montana Kev says, looks like Granny just checked in with that possum idea. Haha. Well, again, just limited to whatever your imagination is I'm not here to judge. Absolutely, if you can source it and it sounds good to you, then by all means go for it. Because again, my big argument is you can you can cook things both inside and outside, but I truly believe you can make it better and a totally, different experience cooking outside by adding that smoke ingredient to your food that you're not going to be able to replicate indoors. I don't care how much liquid smoke you use, it just ain't the same. So that's my position on that. Let's see. Lynn says next up for me will be lamb leg with the bone. All right. So Lynn is excited. Lynn has got a lot of ideas. So Lynn, let me say this. If you're not already in the Backyard SmokeMaster Society, I hope and really hope that you take a moment to join. Again, and it's at the bottom of the screen on that scrolling ticker, backyardsmokemaster.com/society. Get into the society, and I want to see pictures, and maybe if you're up to it, shooting a little bit of video. But I want to see some of the squab and gator and lamb leg and possum. I want to see pictures of this stuff inside of the society. So I'm challenging you to get into the SmokeMaster Society and start cooking this stuff. And, we'll be here to help along the way in case you got questions about using your Weber Smoky Mountain and whatnot. We're here to support. But I definitely want to see, the lamb leg. I want to see the gator. I want to see the possum, the squab, the smoked bourbon. I want to see all of this stuff, okay? So that's my personal invitation to you. I hope you take us up on that. Let's see. Montana Cab says, great idea, Lynn. I've been thinking about the same thing. Lamb smoked on the barbecue with some chimichurri as a finishing sauce. Absolutely. And correctional officer is already throwing out the welcome mat to Lynn. Welcome aboard. You were definitely with the vision. Absolutely. Well, all right. So I think mission accomplished here. All right. So we talked about some of the most common barbecue mistakes, given some practical advice on, why you should pay attention to them and what you can do to avoid or resolve them. Sounds like we also got the imagination sparked and fired up with a lot of different ideas of things that can be cooked on the grill or the smoker. Again, if you can think of it, you can cook it. Absolutely. You are only limited, I think, maybe by space, the size of your cooker. Other than that, I don't see any reason why you'd be unable, to cook any of these things that we have talked about. So again, definitely appreciate everyone's participation. Great hearing from correctional officer and Mike, and we heard from Lynn, Montana Kev, KB Barbecue. Appreciate the advice, the suggestions, the sense of humor, all of that. I mean, this is what the barbecue community that we're building here on the platform is all about. Next live show. So I'm going to be taking a little bit of a break. Just celebrated my birthday a couple of days ago. My wife, Janine, her birthday is coming up next week. So we're going to be on vacation for a little bit. So the next show is going to be, the next live show will be on Wednesday, November 12th. So definitely hope to see you all then. But in the meantime, again, please jump into the Backyard SmokeMaster Society, and we can keep the barbecue conversation, the questions, the suggestions, the tips, the advice, all of that going. So again, appreciate all of your support. Take care. Hope I didn't freeze up there. Looked like I might have frozen up on that screen, which is a little weird. But anyway, get out there, enjoy, utilize your grills and your smokers, and I will see you in a couple of weeks. Thanks again. Take care, everyone.